wholesale change without dealing with what is and what is not best for the majority of counties here in Kansas. So that's the first big reason, is that the formula generally has worked well for our counties, and we don't want to just do away with that formula because of the fact that it has worked well for us. The second reason that we want to make sure that the second reason that we're opposing this bill is because of what this bill could become at some later time. As a lot of you know, most people here in Kansas actually live in incorporated cities. They may not live in large cities, but they do, for the most part, live in the incorporated areas that are within counties. There has been some discussion in the legislature, and I've heard people discussing rumors that they may look to, if this bill were to gain momentum, either in the Senate or in the House, amending this bill to where, rather than counties receiving the full amount of the sales tax, counties would only receive sales tax that was generated in the unincorporated areas. Now, for a lot of you, you may be able to look out in the unincorporated area of your county and you realize there is not a lot of retail in that area. And that's a concern to KAC, that if counties were to, instead of receiving the amount according to the current formula, if they were only receiving the amount generated in the unincorporated areas, for some counties that amount is going to be very, very small. And that's a concern for us as well, is that just this bill could end up changing the way that funds are distributed in a way that is negative to counties throughout the state. And that's something obviously that KAC would not want to have happen to any of our member counties. So those are the big two issues that we have with Senate Bill 396 and its companion House Bill 2656, is that that bill could end up actually harming counties, even though on the surface it appears that that bill may be to the benefit of counties. Now, the other thing is that counties and cities have the ability to partner. As I've stated in the testimony that I'm going to submit to the committee later on this week, on Thursday, when those hearings take place, it's important to counties and the cities that are within those counties that there's a partnership so that those areas can grow. When there is no partnership, it is difficult for that area to grow, because there's going to be constant problems with that. And so we're looking to rather than tear at those partnerships, we're looking to build those partnerships so that our areas can grow. We want to make sure that counties are growing, and the best way to have growth within your county is to have good partnerships with those cities that are there within the county, so that there's efficient governance between both the cities that are in the county and with the county overall. We want to make sure that the county is representing those partnerships in the best possible way. And the best way to do that is, like I said, if the formula is a problem, we can do things to address that. And if you are having problems within your specific county with those formulas, feel free to give us a call here at KAC. We'd be more than happy to come to your county and work with you and work with the municipalities within your county to make sure that things are being addressed and that the funds are being distributed in the most efficient and the best possible way. But we want to make sure that we do that without harming any other counties within the state of Kansas. And the best way to do that is to oppose Senate Bill 396 and the companion House bill and keep the formula in place so that we make sure that none of the partnerships that currently exist are harmed, and also make sure that we are doing what we can to be good stewards of our counties, of our finances that are coming into our counties. If there are any questions about KAC's position on Senate Bill 396 or the companion House bill, I'd be happy to take those now. I'll just note for everyone's information, those hearings are in the Senate Tax Committee on Thursday. The Senate Tax Committee meets at 9:30 in room 152 South of the State House. And then the House Tax Committee meets at 3:30, also on Thursday, and they meet in room 112 North. And they'll be taking up this bill in both of those committees on that day. So if you would like to either submit testimony, the testimony is due on Wednesday. If you'd like to submit testimony on either of those bills in either the Senate or the House, or if you just want to come and watch the proceedings or listen in, you can do so at those times that I mentioned. If there aren't any questions, I'd like to move to Senate Bill 294. This is the bill that deals with the notice and hearing requirements for for raising your budgets or altering the budget within your county. And I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about that as well, to give you an overview of not only where that bill is in the process, but on strategically what KAC has been doing working on that bill. First, I'd like to give you just a brief overview of where that bill is at. That bill passed through the Senate a couple of weeks ago, and it actually passed by a rather large margin. I believe it was either 38-1 or 39-0 that it passed out of the Senate. They did make some amendments to the bill on the floor of the Senate, and those amendments were directed mostly at allowing for e-notice rather than publishing in the official newspaper, and a couple of other things. They exempted some very small entities that have budgets of under $5,000, but that captures very few taxing jurisdictions, obviously, because the budget requirements are so low. They also made some other adjustments to the dates within the bill so that this would not take effect until January of 2021, effectively meaning that this would be the last year under the current structure, and then next year would be the first year under the new structure if this were to pass the House and become law. Obviously, now that this bill has passed the Senate, it is now in front of the House Tax Committee, and the information that KAC has right now is that it will likely go to hearing next week. We are looking at possibly having it go to hearing on Monday of next week, although we will confirm that and probably send out an e-blast once we have that confirmation in place. It's important to understand that if you do have testimony for this bill, if the hearing is in fact next Monday, then you would need to have that testimony submitted by Friday in order to be on the schedule to speak next Monday. Because of that, I would encourage you to start thinking about what testimony you might put together if you are interested in testifying on Senate Bill 294 in front of the House Tax Committee. I'd encourage you to start thinking about what you would like to do as far as testimony now, because you will need to get that testimony in to the committee secretary no later than Friday. If you'd like me to drop off your testimony and submit that to the committee secretary, I can most certainly do that. I will probably try to do that on Thursday, however, simply because we get to cutting it pretty close if I wait all the way until Friday. So I'll probably look to actually submit that testimony on Thursday if you would like me to drop that off for you. I'd like to have that in my hands by the end of the day on Thursday, just so that I can get it all printed out to be dropped off to the committee secretary. So if you have testimony and you're not going to be able to make it to drop those copies off, or if you have testimony that you'd like to submit in writing and don't plan on coming to the committee hearing, by all means, you can send that to me, but please have it to me no later than the end of the day on Thursday. That way I can get it printed off and dropped off over with the committee secretary in a timely manner. Now that I've covered that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the strategy that we're looking at for moving this bill forward. There are several groups, among them the Clerks Association I know is still working on some information that they're looking at, and I'd appreciate any feedback that anyone has on any potential logistical or other technical problems that they see with this bill. This bill will likely go to conference committee. And what that means is basically that the Senate has passed its version now. I know that there are several House members that are considering different amendments. And so it is likely that the version that passes the House will not be exactly the same as the version that passed the Senate. As a result of that, this bill will likely go to the conference committee where the chair, the vice chair, and the ranking minority member will discuss what components of the bill go in, what components stay out, and come to an agreement on the final version of this bill. As a result, I think it's important that we make sure that any logistical issues that you see, any timing issues that you see in this bill, that we make sure and address these, because while it may not be a guarantee that this bill passes at this point, there is a possibility that this bill will pass, particularly because it passed the Senate with such a strong majority. And part of that may be the dynamics of just it being an election year, and a lot of and everyone wants to make sure that they've done something to show that they are listening to their constituents as far as concerns on property tax. So that may have some factor in it. But as a result, there is a possibility that there could be a lot of interest in moving this forward on the House side in some form, maybe not the form that it's currently in, but in some form. To that end, like I said, we're interested in any feedback that you may have, but a couple of amendments that the KAC specifically is pushing forward is a couple of really practical amendments. The first is simplifying the notices so that they are streamlined and they can go out to everyone in the county, and also simplifying the reimbursement procedures for the money that would be paid back to the county for sending out the notices for other taxing jurisdictions. Right now, it says that the county clerk would determine the price for being reimbursed. And while that may seem like it's advantageous, to avoid having conflicts and to avoid really any confusion in what the amount should be for that reimbursement, we'd like to set a formula in statute for how that would be reimbursed, and to have that be based on the number of notices that are sent out for the jurisdiction, so that we can reimburse at those actual costs for the number of notices that are sent, so that it can be split out proportionally based on the number of notices, so that if 1,000 notices are sent out, and that includes notices for 300 people in City A and 500 people in City B, then the county would collect the proportional amount for 300 notices from City A and the proportional amount for 500 notices to City B. And so we're looking at making an amendment so that we make that a part of the bill, so that it is very clear how that money will be reimbursed. One, so that the money is reimbursed in a quick fashion, and two, so that there's just no confusion either on the part of the reimbursing entity or on the part of the county with looking to receive those funds back. The second big amendment that we're looking at is there's a portion of the bill that says that if any taxing jurisdiction were to exceed what is called the revenue neutral amount, then they would have to send out refunds to all of the taxpayers for the amount that they exceeded the revenue neutral amount by. While that may seem somewhat practical, it ends up being impractical in practice, because if, for example, a large county were to exceed their revenue neutral amount by $100,000, while that may seem like a large amount of money, in a large county, by the time you split that up between 400,000 or 500,000 taxpayers, it actually ends up being a very, very small amount that would be going to each taxpayer, probably on the line of probably about 15 to 20 cents per taxpayer. Having come from the banking industry, I can tell you that it is very inefficient to cut checks for less than $1. And as a result, cutting thousands of refund checks for what amounts to pocket change, while while it makes sense on a theoretical level, it is impractical in practice. And so what we're going to look for is an amendment to, rather than have that be refund checks that are sent out that may never even be cashed, because of the fact that if somebody receives a 10-cent check from the county, they're more likely to toss that into the kitchen drawer than they are to take it to the bank. For that reason, we're going to look to make those, rather than send those out as refund checks, simply make that a tax credit to the taxpayer. That way they receive the funds back in the form of a tax credit for the next year. And the county is able to clear those things without having to send out thousands upon thousands or hundreds upon hundreds of checks to reimburse individuals for very, very small amounts of money. Those are the two major items. There is some interest on the House side in doing a consumer price index increase each year, but I don't know yet what the feeling of the committee is for that bill. There are some individuals that are also interested in potentially adding in new growth, that you would be able to automatically capture the new growth. Although I will note that there is less interest in the new growth than there is in the consumer price index portion of it. And even then, I don't know how much interest there is in passing either of those two items along. But those are the major things. Again, if you have an interest in submitting testimony on Senate Bill 294, please send that to me by the end of the day on Thursday. That way I can get that printed out and taken over to the committee secretary in a timely manner. If you are interested in submitting testimony on Senate Bill 396 or on House Bill 2656, because those bills are the same, you can feel free to send the same testimony just with the different headers to the different committees. But if you are interested in doing that, please have that to me, if you want me to drop that off no later than the end of day tomorrow, so that I can get that over first thing on Wednesday to the committee secretary if there's any interest in sending any of that information over. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions either now, or if you think of a question later on that you didn't get typed in now, feel free to give me a call or send me an email here in the office. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. If there's nothing else, thank you for joining us and have a good afternoon.